District is amongst the hardest hit by the floods in Limpopo, with bridges and roads washed away. In Makado, homes have collapsed and roofs have been torn off by the relentless winds and rain. As infrastructure fails and families are displaced, the South African Red Cross Society is on the front lines providing emergency relief. Joining us now to discuss the scale of the crisis is Molefi Takalo, CEO of the Red Cross. Molefi, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I just want to start here following the declaration of these floods as a national disaster, particularly in Limpopo and Mpumalanga. How will this then affect the work that you are doing in those provinces?
No, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers at home. And thanks very much for the opportunity. The declaration and the classification comes at a very critical time. And I think we welcome the classification because I think it's now going to make it much more easier for communities to have access to support and relief services that are supposed to be rendered, the humanitarian relief services that are supposed to be rendered into those communities. I'm sure it now even creates more awareness throughout the country to those that are actually able to come and provide support, to come forward and basically invest their energies and their efforts as well as their resources in those particular provinces, specifically in those local municipalities and areas that are badly affected. And we know that the reports are coming through, and we are fully aware that it's mainly those that are hit the hardest, the most, are the ones who are in the low-lying areas, particularly in the rural areas where it's highly inaccessible for relief to reach to those communities. So it comes at a good time, and we welcome it, and we think it's going to come in very handy for all of us.
You spoke about it, this classification assisting in access to resources and support. Will you then at all be advocating for a portion of the National Disaster Fund?
No, yes, we will. We're actually on the lookout for call. We calling for support from all sorts of fronts, and we are hoping we'll be getting access to the relief fund, like you were saying. But of course, in the process, we are basically calling on corporates as well as anybody, including communities, individuals and families that have it in them to come forward and give that particular support. And I'm sure you are aware that we did not just wait for the classification to happen. The South African Red Cross Society has been on the ground ever since the disaster started in Mpumalanga and in Limpopo and in some parts of the KZN, which is not necessarily wholly spoken about in this current floods that we are experiencing. And of course, there are many, corporates who are actually partners of the South African Red Cross Society, to whom we've reached out and we've requested the support, and there's positive feedback coming. And we are hoping that more support is going to come, because the effect of the disaster are going to live with these people long after the disaster has subsided. I mean, I'm talking about the floods in this particular instance. So, they're having to deal with the aftermath subsequent to the floods themselves. It's going to be a very long and a very daunting task for communities that are affected in those communities, including organizations like ourselves, as well as our government and those corporates that are willing to come and participate.
Molefi, as an auxiliary of the state, you will be then working in tandem with the SANDF and other government auxiliaries, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong there. How will you then be divvying up responsibilities on the ground?
No, the South African Red Cross Society is actually an auxiliary to government, and I don't know if you would be aware that it is established in line with the legislation and an act of parliament. And we are not just an NGO; we are an auxiliary to government on matters of humanitarian nature. And I'm sure you are aware that there are joint operations committees that are taking place at local, at district and provincial, and even at national level, where the South African Red Cross is basically participating with all of those stakeholders that you were mentioning, particularly from our government in particular. So there are ongoing engagements as and when interventions are being sourced, and as and when all of those stakeholders are actively participating and making a contribution in ensuring that we mitigate the impact, because you must remember, the floods and the disaster has occurred already. So all we can do is to mitigate the impact of these floods on the lives of those communities and families that are affected in those areas. So a collaborated effort is the only way that's going to help and assist in ensuring that the impact is not as severe as it would have had it not been for this joint and collaborated effort by all those have it in them to make a contribution in those communities. So it's an ongoing process, and we are doing with everybody that is basically involved in this particular instance. It's not just the Red Cross alone.
Sure. Now, beyond then the immediate cleanup, what long-term psychological or health support is Red Cross providing to some of these vulnerable groups?
Yes, look, and I think it's a very important question, because it must not look like the interventions are only necessary at the time when the floods have already occurred. It can only mean that, you know, the trauma and the trauma that has been caused by the devastations that were brought about by these floods, it's something that's going to live long after the floods have actually disappeared. And it's incumbent upon us, those who are in the humanitarian space, to ensure that we deal with the aftermath, particularly with regard to the psychosocial support services. So the South African Red Cross Society has partners in abundance, and a plethora of other organizations in the space of care and counseling services. And we will be providing the psychosocial support services on our own. But of course, we can't necessarily, as one organization, bring about a very impactful change in those communities. We will have to bring in other resources in this regard. That's going to come in a form of partnerships that we are having currently, that have been existing even long after. I'm talking in the form of, in many instances, because of capacity on the ground, it's going to be somewhat impossible for the South African Red Cross Society to reach to every individual that is affected there. But of course, through the telephonic counseling services of other organizations that are accessible, and I'm talking about the toll-free counseling services or even the hotlines that are available at our disposal, that are going to be made available through all of those partners and the stakeholders that are participating in the joint operations committees that are established at different levels. So the psychosocial support services is something that's going to help in ensuring that communities and families and individuals are finding it easy in the process of rebuilding their lives. I'm sure you know that people were made to witness right before their eyes when their livelihoods were washed away, and having to witness and observe helplessly, because there's really nothing they can do. So those of us who are trained in this particular field have it in ours to go back into those communities and ensure that we walk with them through the path in ensuring that ultimately communities are becoming stable and are able to live their normal lives afterwards.
All right, that is Molefi Takalo from the Red Cross there. Thank you very much for your time. Still to